we're able to find much, much higher quality candidates that are highly engaged because we lay out that career path in front of them, and then we stick to it. And so what would normally take 12 or 14 quick service people, we do with 8 or 10, 8 or 9 people, because they're engaged and they're productive, and they're working towards a goal of becoming a technician.
Welcome to the Strategy with Jason podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Golden Wrench Podcast, where I get to talk to anybody and, frankly, everybody I want to talk to when it comes to the fixed ops side of the business. Now, today, I got a very special guest. I'm so excited to jam with this individual. We have some great topics. It's going to be a really fun conversation. So get some of that popcorn and grab a cup of coffee, because we're going to get into this. But hey, we can't make great content like this without our amazing sponsor. And here's just a quick message from that sponsor.
For years, I've been saying that you have to process your way to profitability, and no one knows that better than the folks at Repair 360. You all know how important it is to have a fast, streamlined used car reconditioning process. Remember, time kills profit. Getting a used car frontline ready in less time while providing transparent communication between departments is what Repair 360 is all about. With Repair 360's automated used car recon manager, you will drive recon times down while giving sales the visibility they need to stop complaining. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding about that part. Anyways, you have to check out their website at repair360.com and see how they can revolutionize your reconditioning process.
All right, guys, you ready? I got a great guest with me. I have the one, I have the only, the oh so famous, at least that's what I've been told, Richard Lupo with me. Richard, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Well, thanks, Jason, for having me. And I'm not sure who's doing your research about that famous part, but it's a big introduction to live up to. But I appreciate the vote of confidence.
Well, man, I look, Richard, we got some time to chat a little bit, guys, before we start recording today. So I know this is going to be a very fun conversation. And man, I just appreciate you taking the time to come jam with me and share some of the insights and experience that you have, on this, just the fun side of the business, right? The back side of the restaurant, God, I love the fixed ops side. But let's do this, Richard. I love kicking off podcasts with a little origin story. Because I'm just fundamentally fascinated, right? Let's do this. How did you get started in this crazy little world we call the automotive industry?
Well, I was literally born into it. My father had a independent repair shop when I was born. The point of which was to support a really bad racing habit.
Of course.
And so they, him and a couple of guys that worked on the race car had a repair shop, and they fixed cars during the week, and in the evenings and on the weekends they raced. And so you can find pictures of me in the family photo albums that probably just past the age of diapers, crawling around my dad's garage. And definitely just grew up in the business and fixing cars, working on race cars. And eventually I was fortunate enough that my dad fired me from the family business and got out on my own, and spent a bunch of years in the aftermarket, and then moved in too long ago to remember into the dealership side of it, and spent my years as a technician. And at a certain point, we decided to try to spread our wings and make a bigger impact with the talents, I guess, that I thought I had, and made the switch over to becoming a service manager. And I've progressed over the last few decades in that part of the craft. So that's the origin story of getting in. We had a dad that was involved into it, involved in fixing of cars. He's
Still doing it?
yeah, at
Yeah,
80, at 80, he still tinkers. He's got some hot rods in the garage, and
of course.
still highly involved with racing. And it's a big part of our family story. And we're kind of really intermingled with another family that him and his best friend uh, grew up racing together. And
That's awesome. It's family affair, man. You get gasoline in your blood when when you're raised like that. Now, a few decades, man. Just name some of the different OEMs or franchises that you've worked for. I'm sure that you've got some great stories.
the very first dealership I went to work for was a small dealership in a small town of Pennsylvania, very similar to the small town of Pennsylvania I was born and raised in. They were the oldest Plymouth dealer in the United States at the time. And I got to work in the new shop that was built in the 60s.
Wow.
And
Only had a little bit of lead paint, just a little.
yeah. Uh, so yeah, I grew up, did some, CJDR stuff, what we know now,
Yep.
CGDR stuff. Um and then found my way over to a Hyundai store as a technician, and then over to a Honda store about 25 years ago, and spent the majority of my career with Honda, and definitely had several years with Nissan. I
Hmm.
really enjoyed my time with Nissan, and the folks at SET and Toyota. Enjoyed my time with them as well, and learned a lot with SET. And so I'd say the majority of it's Honda, with a good smidge of Nissan and Toyota. Had a cup of coffee a couple of times at a Ford store. And
A cup of coffee.
when you
No,
work
but
for
that's
some of
what
those
that's
big companies, they put you where they need you sometimes. And I was always a faithful soldier when they took me out of a
you,
Honda store and put me in a Ford store. Hey, you got to do what you got to do for keeping yourself on the playing field.
well, that's what you have to do, right? You do what you got to do. Like, look, it doesn't surprise me, and with your experience, I'm glad to kind of get into some of the topics that we have today. And when you're born into it, you're born into it. It doesn't surprise me that you've had that many years of experience. And look here for some fun OEMs. I mean, definitely over the years that you've been working with them, there's definitely been some trials in some of those OEMs. So I can't imagine how that is. Like, I love our first topic because I think for a lot of the people out there watching and listening right now, they're in a very similar boat, right? This is the one thing I kind of love about this industry, right? Is that there are still a lot of family owned, companies out there that, and that can just be single points. And there are some family owned big groups as well. I mean, I've worked for a large family-owned group that owned over 60 locations, so it's like but it's still cool to see that exist out there. But I also know, because I had the opportunity to visit a lot of different dealerships. All right, there are some big difference between maybe some of the corporate structured dealerships and some of the family-run businesses. I'd love to kind of pick your brain, and in what you've seen is some of the differences and maybe some of the challenges that a family run business has versus a corporate one.
Well, I had the fortune when I made it to that Honda store to work for a guy named Luther Coggin, who passed a couple of years back. But great story. Started as on the wash rack, and when he retired, he was owner of 26 dealerships, and they were sold into the Asbury Automotive Group. And Luther was a great businessman, and I spent 25 years or so in the Jacksonville, Florida market, and he was a big presence there. And there definitely was a transition from when Luther owned the company into the Asbury uh, company, and so we definitely learned a lot, experienced a lot of different things during that transition, and
Mhm.
really enjoyed my time at Asbury. Learned a ton of stuff, and like I said, we had a cup of coffee at a Ford store once or twice, and Nissan stores, Honda stores, and got introduced to so many things that I wouldn't have if I was at a single point owner
Yeah,
store.
100%. Yeah, I think that's actually really kind of cool. The fact that you've really kind of experienced both. I like finding rabbit holes, by the way. So sometimes I'll find a rabbit hole and I want to go down that rabbit hole. But I'd love to kind of get your perspective. What do you say is some of the things that you really appreciate about a corporate runs, corporate structure kind of store versus kind of a family run business? What are things you kind of appreciate about both of them?
Um, the structure, you're always when you're, for instance, when just an analogy, when you're successful at racing and somebody has some cutting edge technology, they bring it to you and give it to you for free so that you'll try it and put a sticker on your race car, right?
Sure.
And the same thing when you're one of these big companies and somebody's got some cool new tool that will help you mine CRM data or the latest marketing strategies, the latest AI stuff, the Asbury's, Auto Nations, those guys, Group One, thing, companies like that, they get access to that stuff and are on the development side. A lot of times, though, I know during my time there, I was a beta store for several big companies and helped develop different parts of it,
Hmm.
software for companies. So you get exposed to the newest and latest technologies. There's a lot of structure there, a lot of accountability, and over time, you get to appreciate that part of it. Um, and after being exposed to those things, um, one of my we moved here about 3 years ago into the Western North Carolina
Yep.
area, over to Appletree, Honda and Acura. They have two franchises. We have three rooftops, and um, it's been a wonderful transition for me. There's a lot more autonomy with
Hmm.
a family-owned business the way this one is. It's historically owned. It's been in the family for over 50 years,
That's
and
amazing.
so I'm able to take and draw from that structure um, and take that autonomy that I have now, being in contact with the ownership.
Hmm.
One of the things that you don't get to do when you're a new service manager at a small dealership somewhere and they own 100 dealerships is you don't get to call up the CEO and say, "Hey, I got an idea."
That's true. That's true.
He's trying to figure out ways to bring value to the shareholders, and then you get the execution of those
Of
ideas to bring
course.
that value to the shareholders. So we don't really have to deal with some of the constraints that sometimes that corporate world twists you into.
Hmm.
But again, learning and drawing from all that experience, we've been able to really help make some differences at the Apple Tree organization over the last few years and made some great strides in expanding the scope and the depth of the business that we've been able to retain.
Yeah, it really does kind of like, the cool thing is your experience kind of does bring and allow to have kind of the best of both worlds, right? I mean, one of the things I've come to appreciate about, corporately run stores is their commitment to process and, their commitment to the documentation of that process, right? And not only the documentation of the process, but also the measurement of that process. And that is one thing I love. Maybe it's just because, I grew up doing a lot of sports and, in when you're really competitive in sports or when you're really competitive in racing, right? You measure everything. You measure the time that it takes to go from one gear to another. You measure your off the line time. You're measuring your finishing time. You're looking at the RPMs on each one of those times, right? And you're constantly optimizing. And I love kind of that corporate structure of consistently measuring and optimizing and trying to do better and better and better. But then to your point, I also love the ability to move and be nimble that family organization gives you, right? It's like to your point, you're not going to have to go through, 9 layers of corporate individuals, right, to make a fundamental decision. You're like, hey, that's a good idea. That looks like it's working. Okay, let's start Monday. So like
Absolutely.
I love that balance, man. And I think anybody out there watching, listening, you want to bring that to it because you see big benefits. What are some of the benefits you've seen since you've been at the location you are now?
Well, I can uh, long tenure associates that we have on our team that are just very vested in the keeping the company relevant in into the future. When we say, hey, listen, we're going to ask you to change how we do business because we can see some writing on the wall over the next few years that we need to move our business over to this sector, or concentrate on this aspect of the business. You get buy-in because it's a very intimate setting, a family-like setting. People are very vested, been here a long time, and they're really vested in keeping the company local
Hmm.
and keeping it successful and relevant. So, and me personally, I can tell you, um, I can sum it up real quick. You're talking about sports, and the people that know me will know that I have a very large family, um, and uh, I have the opportunity. I'm checking out of here in another hour or so to go coach football
There
for
you go.
my middle school. One of my middle school, one of my middle school sons' football teams,
Love it.
and it wasn't a hard discussion with the owner of the company. He said, "Hey, I need to cut out of here, an hour early, a couple of days a week, to go coach my son's football team." And
Again, another great benefit of just the flexibility of just being that family-owned business. We got talked a little bit about before we start recording here. At my dealership, I ran a 4-day on, 3-day off schedule, and that was very rare at the time. Very, very rare, actually, at the time in which I did that. And it's just again, that is true. I do find that the corporate structure, but also the family run businesses, I think, do have a tendency of maintaining some corporate structure, but also balancing out that family home life, work life balance, right? And I think that's super important. Hey, I want to get into our next topic because I think it's really cool. Is in staying in line with kind of the family run business theme, it's how do we define the value of a family run business, right? Because I mean, Richard, we're probably both in that similar age group that at one point in time when we were young, what it meant to be a family owned company is very, very different than I think what the perception is today. I mean, I perceived, that marketing message of, hey, we're a family run company, you want to come see us, is that we're small. And because of that, we're very intimate, But, the funny thing is in our industry, I mean, even with the group you're working right now, they own 3 locations and probably employ several hundred people. I don't know if I'd consider that a small business. So what do you think should be today's value prop of a family run business? I'd love to get your thoughts.
well, we I when I got here, we I you know I found that as such a unique value proposition that we leaned into it really hard,
Mhm.
and brought that to our customers. And it's part of our value proposition that we bring. I'm a big value proposition person. I think that I've said it before. You have to, for your customers, you have to bring equity, which is an equitable exchange of our time and talents for the treasure that we ask them to give up to an exchange. And if that's an equitable exchange, then everybody's going to be happy. And so that finding that medium is the value.
Yes.
And we're very very blessed to be in the community that we are. Asheville, Western North Carolina. Asheville's a unique city. All cities are unique, uh, but it gets really rural really quick.
Mhm.
Asheville's a nice sized little city, but it's tucked away in these mountains up in Western North Carolina. And you get 20 minutes outside of the city, and it gets really rural really quick. Um, and so there's a vibe it's spread throughout Asheville and the surrounding communities, is to keep it local.
Sure.
It's we are the Austin, Texas of the Appalachians. It's keep it weird, keep it local, and so it is of value to our community to keep it local. And
Sure.
the Apple Tree family that owns it, it's owned the store for 50 years, second generation owning it now, and it's a staple in the community. There's I doubt that we could quantify how many little league teams and have been sponsored, and how many turkeys have been given away for Thanksgiving over a 50-year span. It's just integral to the part of the community. Um,
That's true. When you're in a community that long, you're not just a part of it. You're kind of embedded into the DNA of it, and that does kind of come by time, right? I mean, I think if you're out there watching and listening right now, and maybe you're the second or possibly third generation of a family owned business, I think one of the things you have to look at is that is something that happened by osmosis. Now, I think there are things intentionally that we do because we're a family owned business that others don't do. For example, I mean, look, we all know what we do. There's a 30-foot sign outside that says what we do.
yeah, absolutely.
Right now, why we do it the way we do it, all right, can be very family driven in its value, and I'm sure you've seen some examples of that being played out. Any maybe that you can share? You kind of seen how that not just what we do, but why we do it that way we do it is just because of the family driven values. Have you seen how that's played out at your dealership at all?
Well, just rang true today. I had lunch with one of our longtime technicians,
Hmm.
and I was able to address one on one with him a couple of concerns he had about um, how his job was going, and a couple of concerns that he had. And so we went and sat down and had a lunch together and put a game plan together to fix those things that he had some concerns with. And the investment at the individual level is probably different at a family owned,
For
a
sure.
smaller
Sure.
family owned business this way, where it is truly a value. I mean, as cliche as it may sound, it's
Oh,
when I talk to the owners, they're not into losing people. You're
there you go,
very
right there.
very slow to do and to take any action like that, and truly they want to invest in the people that we've decided to offer and bring aboard as part of our team. And so you don't stop investing. And I've had an advisor that I've been working with for almost over a year now on getting his CSE scores, his customer satisfaction ratings up, and it's been a constant conversation. And we know he's got the talent, but we haven't been able to unlock that key. And about 3 months ago, we were doing some coaching,
Mm.
and we found that after a year and a half, we finally drilled down and found that one piece. And just yesterday, he got 7 perfect surveys in one day,
Wow.
and he is among the top now over the last 3 or 4 months since we were able to figure out what that thing was. And it wasn't from lack of trying for a couple of better part of a year and a half trying to get that all together. We
Mhm.
just after that just invest and invest and invest, and we finally unlocked the key, found the key to unlock it, and he's getting better paychecks.
Yeah.
He's happier in his job. His customers are finally giving the feedback that uh, we've been looking to get from him. So
Well, and that's a perfect example of kind of what we're talking about. That's kind of that value point, right? I mean, it's not to say that you couldn't do it at a corporately run store, but it's implied there. It's like I'm pretty confident, Richard, you didn't have to go and get permission to take this individual out to lunch and then have to, fill out a form to make sure that you got some type of reimbursement for it or whatever. It was just there was such an emphasis, and then that's one of those whys, right? Why did you guys do it the way that you did it? Is just because there is just an implied emphasis on just the importance of the people, right? And I'm with you on that, right? I've even in my own dealership, I'm the first one to say that the success of our business was completely. We did some pretty amazing things, but it was because of those people. All right. I would like to think that maybe my leadership helped a smidge or two, but you know how it is, right? In the beginning, it's that leadership.
it does. Well, I mean, you have to be very conscious of an ego. We all have them, and you have to keep them in check. But if you're bold enough to say, "Hey, I want to sit in a chair and lead a team of 100 people and service a couple hundred cars a day and millions in revenues and assets," it takes a little bit of takes a certain ego to do that, a certain amount of ego to do that, but you also have to make sure that it stays in check at all time. You stay humble and thankful, and make sure that that's conveyed to the people that you're charged with being the leader of.
Well, and I think that's a perfect segue kind of into our next topic, right? Because we want to talk a little bit about training and developing, specifically technicians, right? Because, I don't know about what your thoughts and opinions are, Richard, but I got to be honest with you. I don't think there's enough of this going on. And, I've talked to some people at different organizations that try to specialize in getting young people into, these type of positions. And frankly, they're just, we're not doing a good job of making this look sexy. Okay. It's just, busted up knuckles and hands that, just hurt like hell because of years of, being a grease monkey and turning wrenches and stuff. Like that's a brutal, brutal business, and it's just like, the training and the development of it, I think is so key to bringing new people into our business, because from the outside looking in, it's not always a pretty looking business. But I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on how do we approach the training and developing of technicians and how that helps support bringing new people into the industry.
Well, I'll start by saying that there's a lot of people in our industry making a lot of money
True.
doing tech recruitment,
Yes.
and fortunately, we don't. I get inquiries from them all the time. Hey, I can guarantee you 20 great applicants, and just sign here for whatever amount of money. But we do not have that issue here. And uh, several years ago, when I first got here, identified an opportunity, and that was to bring. And I have to actually give Ed Roberts some credit.
An
Uh,
amazing guy. We just did a podcast together. Great
did
guy.
you really?
Yes.
So I was in the Jacksonville market, like I said, for 25 years, and was in the Ford business in the Jacksonville area for a little while, and got to know Ed, and we talk often, and he's a great guy. And the things that he's doing with technician training are unparalleled in our business, and that's one of the key things among several that set him apart. And we were not developing our talent. And I see this with a, a lot of dealerships, that when you're hired as a express guy or a lube guy, it's almost a destination, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
And we restructured everything that we did, and now that we don't have lube techs or express techs or anything like that. We have entry level technicians, and the we have a clear training path, a clear path of succession. This is what you do. You do this test, and in this time frame, and it will lead to this step. Uh,
Yes.
and so we have a clear progression. We go out and we're able to find much higher quality candidates, that are highly engaged, because we lay out that career path in front of them, and then we stick to it. And so what would normally take 12 or 14 quick service people, we do with 8 or 10, 8 or 9 people, because they're engaged and they're productive, and
100%.
they're working towards a goal of becoming a technician. We've graduated 2 this year, through that program, and one is on the line, and one is in the middle of their mentoring with one of our master technicians right now.
That
And
is too cool.
yeah, and actually we have a guy that's been with us over 30 years as a technician, and he because we've got some of these younger people, I don't
Hmm.
want to say guys, because actually one of our superstars, who's actually at Honda school right now, is a female technician, and she's a superstar for us.
It's awesome.
Um, uh, it's eased his mind about getting to that point where he can retire now. He
Because there's a position for him too, right? Because he can continue to do that. Is that the plan?
well, he's going to retire,
Okay.
and but he's been so vested in our company, he did not want to retire. And
Ah,
now he sees the newer uh, class of technicians, these younger people coming in that have been with us for 2 years or more, and that are invested in the company the way he has been, and we've grown them. They're here. They know our processes, and they're trained up. And it's a succession plan for some of our older technicians that are looking to maybe cut back on their time here. They don't have that drive to do 70 or 100 hours that
Sure.
somebody in their 20s does. When I was in my 20s, I was turning 80 hours as a technician, and
Absolutely. Why not?
but when you're in your 60s and you're bordering on your 70s, you don't your mortgage is probably paid for at that point, and your kids aren't going through school, and you don't need to turn 80 hours a week. And so it takes some of that pressure off some of those people that have been here for decades that are very, very vested in the interest of the company.
I,
And
I I just love the fact that they're vested like that, Richard. Like that's just huge, And you know what? It's funny that you brought this up, and I don't know if you guys have this plan or not, but I have seen this actually now at some other dealerships. Is in the shop a newer role that I started seeing, and I was like, what is that? Like, what's shop mentor? I was like, what is that? Like, who's that person? But I've now seen it now at a couple different shops, of some shops employing me, some guys with, or guys with a lot of experience that maybe only come in once a week, but they really kind of focus on kind of the mentoring part. Because look, I know as service managers, do we there's enough fires going on somewhere that we have to be putting out that it's like I'd be the first one to admit that I was not consistently great at my mentoring, but I'm glad to see that there are dealerships out there considering and possibly even bringing in or creating this position of someone coming in once or twice a week from a mentoring perspective. So it sounds like you already got that, which I think is amazing.
yeah, no, we're so fortunate. We actually have it's a two-step process. We have a mentoring that goes on with our shop foreman. We have a full-time salaried. He's not a production-based person.
That's
Then
cool.
just 100% salary, and his job is to mentor technicians. And he does that through, we give him some of our most problematic cars, and he
Hmm.
has these younger guys and gals go with him, and go through the really in-depth process of you know looking at some of these harder, more problematic cars, and then when they after they spend probably 2 or 3 months, depending on his opinion of them, then they move out of the mentorship and into an apprenticeship with one of our master technicians for another couple of months.
Mm.
And so that they'll probably spend a year in our quick service department, then another couple of months mentoring, and then another couple of months as an apprentice. And so they're a better part of 2 years, if not 2 years, with us till they hit the line. And
Wow.
their success as a flat rate technician is almost insured at that point.
Yeah,
Uh,
makes sense.
yeah, it's been something that's really changed our business.
Well, and you know what? I love the commitment, man, and it's cool that you guys are able to do that. And I think any dealership out there, I don't care if you're listening from a corporate structured dealership or a family owned dealership right now. I think there's so much value in building out and structuring and being intentional with that type of mentoring. It is so because it's not just going to happen on its own. You have to be intentional. Look, Richard, I know we're getting towards the tail end of our time, and I feel like I could easily jam about this with you way longer. But
We can do it anytime, man. Anytime you want.
and I will. I'm going to take you up on that. But hey, before I let you go, for everybody out there watching and listening right now, who would maybe love to pick up some of this conversation, or even maybe ask you a personal question about some of the stuff we've talked about, what's the best way to connect with you, Richard?
Uh, Simply LinkedIn. I spent some time on LinkedIn, and my profile is probably fairly easy to find. It's just Richard Lupo, and I'm at Apple Tree, Honda and Acura in the Western North Carolina, Asheville area. And feel free to anyone reach out, pick my brain. I'm always available. It's been such a blessing in my life. This business, it's done so much for me, and if I can help spread any amount of information, help anybody out to further uh, give back what's been given to me, I'm always open for that.
That's awesome, man. I really do, and I can already tell. I can tell how authentic and passionate you are because I'm with you, man. I'm 100% there, right? Like I love it. Hey, for everybody out there, the biggest compliment that you can give either myself or Richard is share the show. All right. If you have anybody out there that, could get some value from listening to our conversation today, it would mean the world to us if you could share the show with them. Richard, this has been awesome, and I really, really appreciate your time for hanging out with me today. Hey, for everybody out there, you have yourselves an amazing day. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy with Jason podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Happy podcasting.